You know how some stories start with a single, harmless decision. Mine began on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, one I thought would be as dull as any other day in my quiet, predictable life. My name's Daniel. I'm 38, married for 12 years to a woman named Claire. She's kind, steady, dependable. We built a quiet suburban life together. A mortgage, a dog, dinner at 6 p.m. and a routine so tight you could set your watch by it. For the longest time, I thought that's what happiness was supposed to look like. Stability, familiarity, no surprises. Until she came along. Her name was Emily, 26, my wife's new co-worker at the marketing firm. Claire used to talk about her constantly, how bright she was, how full of ideas, how she reminded her of her younger self. At first, I didn't think much of it. But then, one night, Emily showed up at our house for dinner. I still remember opening the door and seeing her standing there. Rain on her hair, a nervous smile, holding a bottle of wine she probably couldn't afford. There was something magnetic about her. It wasn't just beauty, though she was beautiful. It was the way she looked at you, like she saw something deeper than you wanted her to. That dinner changed everything. She laughed easily, asked me questions no one had asked in years. Daniel, what did you want to be before you got stuck behind a desk? I told her I used to want to be a photographer. She said, then why aren't you one now? I laughed it off, but her words stayed in my head long after she left. The next few weeks, she came by more often, always under the pretext of helping Claire with work projects. Sometimes she stayed for dinner. Sometimes she'd linger after Claire went upstairs to take a shower. And slowly, without realizing it, we began to build something dangerous, something unspoken. It was in the small moments, the way she'd brush past me in the kitchen, her hand barely grazing mine, the way her eyes would linger a second too long when our gazes met, the way she called me Dan, when everyone else called me Daniel. I told myself it was harmless, that I was just imagining it, that a man my age had no business even thinking about someone like her. But temptation doesn't always announce itself with flashing red lights. Sometimes it whispers. One Friday night, Claire had to stay late at the office. She texted me that Emily would be dropping off some documents she needed printed for the morning meeting. I didn't think twice about it. When Emily arrived, it was raining again, hard this time. Her hair was soaked, and her white shirt clung to her shoulders. She laughed, embarrassed, and said, "Guess I picked the wrong night to walk." I offered her a towel and a hot drink. She followed me into the kitchen, shivering slightly. When I turned around to hand her the mug, our fingers brushed, and for a split second, maybe less, neither of us moved. The air shifted, her eyes met mine, and it felt like something electric passed between us. Something neither of us could name, but both understood. She whispered, almost apologetically, "I shouldn't be here this late." I said, "You're fine." But my voice wasn't convincing even to myself. We stood there in silence, the rain pounding against the windows, the kitchen light flickering faintly. And then she said something that nearly made me forget who I was. "Do you ever wish you could just start over, Dan? Just for one night?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because deep down, I knew exactly what she meant. Over the next few days, I tried to avoid her. I told Claire I didn't want Emily coming by anymore. Made up some excuse about needing quiet at home. But avoiding her was like trying not to think of the word blue. The harder I tried, the more she filled my mind. I started checking my phone more often, waiting for her texts, which never came. I told myself it was over, that it had just been a moment. But the truth, I wanted her to reach out. And when she finally did, it was like lighting a match in a room full of gasoline. It was a simple text. "Greater than you left your umbrella in my car that night. Want me to drop it off?" I didn't even remember leaving an umbrella, but I said yes anyway. She came over the next evening when Claire was at her yoga class, and that night was the first time I realized how far I'd already fallen. We didn't cross any lines, not yet. but the tension between us was thick enough to choke on. She sat across from me, legs tucked under her, eyes glowing in the low light. "You know this is dangerous," she said quietly. I replied, "Then why are you here?" She smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "Maybe I wanted to see if you'd tell me to leave." I didn't. The next morning, I told myself it had to stop. I went for a run, deleted her number, and promised I'd focus on my marriage. But you can't just delete a person from your head like that. A week later, Claire invited me to a company retreat. She said Emily would be there too. I almost said no, but how could I explain that? That weekend changed everything, because that's when Emily stopped being just a temptation and became the secret that would tear my life apart. It's strange how guilt and desire can live in the same body. That weekend retreat, it was supposed to be about teamwork and strategy, but for me, it became something far more dangerous. Claire was excited about it. Her company had rented out a lake house 2 hours north, a mix of work meetings, games, and relaxation. She kept saying how nice it would be to get away for a few days. I told myself I was going only to support her, but deep down, I knew I was walking straight into the fire. When we arrived, the air felt different, cold, heavy with pine and lake mist. The cabin was big and beautiful, all wood and glass, with a long deck overlooking the water. Inside, I recognized a few people from our office, and then there she was, Emily, standing by the fireplace, holding a cup of coffee, laughing at something one of the guys said. When she saw me, her smile changed, softer, smaller, almost guilty. For a moment, the world blurred around her. Claire went to greet her colleagues, and I forced myself to look away. But every time I glanced back, Emily's eyes found mine again. That night, after dinner, everyone gathered around the fire pit outside. The air was cool, filled with laughter and smoke. Someone brought a guitar, someone else wine. Claire sat next to me, leaning on my shoulder. I tried to focus on her, to remember that she was my life. But I could feel Emily's presence like static in the air. At one point, she walked past us, close enough that I caught the faint scent of her perfume. Something light, almost sweet. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. It was enough to pull me into the same dangerous orbit again. Later that night, when everyone had gone to their rooms, I couldn't sleep. I went outside for some air, telling myself I just needed to clear my head. The lake was still. The moon reflected on its surface like a blade of light. And that's when I heard her voice. "Can't sleep either." She stood near the dock, barefoot, wrapped in a blanket. "Too much coffee," I lied. She smiled faintly. "Too much thinking, maybe." We talked, quietly, cautiously, about nothing and everything. About how small life can feel when every day looks the same. About wanting more, but being afraid to reach for it. At one point, she said, "You're not like the others, Dan. You actually listen." I told her that wasn't true, that she didn't know me. She looked at me for a long moment and said, "Maybe I know you better than you think." I should have walked away right then, but I didn't, because in that moment, she saw the part of me I'd been hiding, the restless, lonely man behind the routine. And that night, something shifted permanently. The next morning, things felt different. The air between us was heavier, charged. She kept her distance, but every time our eyes met, it was like we were both remembering that conversation by the lake. Claire didn't notice. She never did. She was too busy leading meetings, too focused on impressing her boss. That afternoon, we were split into groups for team-building exercises. Claire was assigned elsewhere, while Emily and I ended up in the same team. It was almost cruel, the way fate kept throwing us together. At one point, during a game that required blindfolds and trust, she was the one guiding me, her hands on my shoulders, her breath close to my ear, whispering directions. Every word, every touch, felt like crossing a line we both knew was there. When the activity ended, I stepped away, trying to catch my breath. My pulse was racing like I'd just run a marathon. She avoided my gaze, biting her lip. And yet, that night, she came to find me again. Everyone had gone to bed early after dinner. The cabin was quiet. I was sitting alone in the living room, scrolling through my phone, pretending to read emails, when she appeared at the doorway. "Hey," she whispered. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away, but I didn't tell her to leave either. She sat down across from me, her hands folded in her lap. "I hate that this feels so wrong," she said. "I didn't plan any of it." "Me neither," I replied quietly. "But you feel it too, don't you?" she asked. I didn't speak. My silence was enough. She took a shaky breath. "Then what are we doing, Dan? Why are we pretending this isn't real?" I looked at her, really looked at her. The fear in her eyes, the confusion, the vulnerability, it mirrored my own. "I'm married," I said finally. "Whatever this is, it can't happen." She nodded, tears forming. I know. But she hesitated, then whispered, "I wish I'd met you first." That sentence, those 6 words, hit harder than I could have imagined. She stood up, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I'll stay away. You don't have to worry." And before I could stop her, she walked away. The next day, she barely spoke to me. She laughed with the others, acted normal, but it was all an act. I felt the distance like a physical ache. When we finally packed up to leave, she gave me one last glance, small, sad, final. Then she got into her car and drove away. On the drive home, Claire was in a good mood, talking about how successful the retreat had been. I nodded at the right moments, pretending to listen, while my mind replayed every second of that weekend. When we got home, I stood in the shower for almost an hour, trying to wash off the guilt, the longing, the what-ifs. But some things don't wash off. Weeks passed. One didn't see Emily again, or at least, I tried not to. She stopped coming to our house, stopped texting Claire as much. But every time I heard her name, something twisted inside me. One evening, Claire mentioned she'd been acting distant at work. "Maybe she's seeing someone new," she said casually. I forced a smile. "Good for her," I replied. But the thought of her with someone else felt like a punch to the gut. I knew I had no right to feel that way. I was the married one. But logic doesn't stand a chance against emotion. A few days later, I was leaving my office when I saw her. She was waiting by my car, standing in the glow of a streetlight. "Emily," I said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" She hesitated. I didn't know where else to go. She looked upset, eyes red from crying. I opened the car door and said, "Get in." We drove in silence for a while. She finally said, "I tried to move on, Dan. I really did. But every time I close my eyes, I see you." I pulled over. My hands were shaking. "Emily, don't," she said softly. "Don't say you don't feel it too." I didn't. Because she was right. And then, without thinking, I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. That moment, that simple touch, felt like stepping off a cliff. We didn't go home together that night. We just sat there in the car, holding hands, both knowing it was only a matter of time before everything we'd tried to avoid would finally happen. When I got home, Claire was sitting on the couch, smiling. "Hey, you're late. Everything okay?" I nodded. "Just traffic." She kissed me goodnight, and I stood there frozen, realizing I'd crossed an invisible line that could never be undone. Over the next week, Emily and I exchanged a few messages, brief, coded, careful. She wrote things like, "Hope you're okay," and I replied with, "Thinking of you." It was dangerous and stupid, and I couldn't stop. One day, she texted, "Greater than we need to talk. Somewhere private." That was the moment I knew. The moment everything would change. Because no matter how much I tried to fight it, I was already too far gone. And the worst part, I didn't even know if I wanted to stop anymore. The next few days were the worst of my life. Every thought, every glance, every quiet moment was consumed by her. by Emily. I tried to focus on Claire, on our home, on the life we'd built. But it was like trying to hold water in your hands. No matter how tight I clenched, it slipped through my fingers. It all came to a head one evening. I was at my office late, pretending to work, when my phone buzzed. A message from Emily. Greater than meet me. Now. I can't wait any longer. My chest tightened. I didn't respond immediately. I knew what she meant. I knew what this could lead to. And yet, part of me, the part I hated, wanted to go. I locked my office door and drove to the small park where she said she'd wait. The streetlights reflected off the wet asphalt, making everything feel unreal. Like a scene from a movie I wasn't supposed to be in. She was there, pacing slightly, her hair loose in the wind. Dan, she said softly, I can't stop thinking about you. I can't pretend anymore. I took a deep breath, trying to fight the magnetic pull she had over me. Emily, we can't, I said, voice low, trembling. She stepped closer, her hand brushing mine. But we already are, she whispered. I swallowed hard. She was right. Emotionally, morally, mentally, we were already entwined, and that terrified me. I walked her back to her car, trying to regain control, trying to remind myself that my marriage, my life, was still mine to protect. And then she did something I'll never forget. She took both my hands in hers, and looked straight into my eyes. Dan, she said, almost pleading, I know you feel it. I see it in you every time you try to hide it. Don't fight it. Don't fight us. I wanted to. I wanted to run away. Lock myself in a room. Delete her number. Swear never to see her again. But every ounce of rationality collided with the raw truth. I wanted her to. That night, I went home to Claire, feeling like a man with a bomb in his chest. She greeted me with a smile, completely unaware of the emotional chaos inside me. I kissed her, hugged her, tried to drown myself in normalcy. And then, in the mirror, I saw myself. A man on the edge, torn between desire and responsibility, guilt and longing. I realized I had a choice. And it was one of the hardest choices I'd ever face. I didn't call Emily back the next day. I didn't text her. I didn't see her. Instead, I went home, sat with Claire, and tried to reconnect in the ways I'd neglected for years. Small gestures, cooking dinner, asking about her day, actually listening, things I'd stopped doing long ago. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't magical, but it was real. And for the first time in weeks, I felt the tension inside me start to ease. Emily didn't contact me again. I don't know if she understood that I'd chosen my life with Claire over the temptation she represented, or if she even cared. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had given in. Would it have been ecstasy, or would it have been destruction in slow motion? You'll never know. What I do know is this: desire can be intoxicating, temptation can feel irresistible, and sometimes the person who seduces you isn't evil. Sometimes they're just human, just like you. But choosing what's right, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, that's what defines you. You'll never forget Emily. I don't think I'm supposed to, but I also don't regret making the choice to stay. Because in the end, the hardest battles are the ones we fight with ourselves. What would you do if you were in my place? Would you have resisted temptation, or followed your heart, even knowing the consequences?
If you've stayed with me till the end, thank you. Share what you think in the comments, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what happens next.